Hi everybody, it's Teresa with restixing.com and I'm back with another Halloween craft project for you. If you've ever been to Disneyland, I'm sure you've gone to the Haunted Mansion. It's pretty iconic and I love that like creepy Victorian vibe of it. In fact, I have a whole Halloween tree dedicated to that black and white, spooky Victorian era. I just love it. So I was thinking about the Haunted Mansion and that inspired me to make my house a little more of a Haunted Mansion. So what I'm going to be doing is making a fake stone plaque like you would see there at that attraction with my family name on it. So the first thing I did was get this wooden plaque from the craft store. I can't remember even which one I bought it at, probably Michael's or Joann's. And what I'm going to do is use this air dry clay. This is by Crayola, but there's a million brands out there. You just want a clay that you don't have to put in a kiln, and this happens to be white. So I've actually, I don't know if you can see, I've put a ton of extra water in here because this is water soluble clay. And so this makes it really thin. And what I'm gonna do is just get messy. I'm going to spread this stuff all over this plaque, and that's what's gonna make it that stone look. I'm not gonna worry about whether or not it's a little rough. I want that. I want like pock marks, and I want it to not be smooth. I don't want it to look like wood. I want it to look like stone. So I'm gonna plaster this stuff all over this, and then let it dry overnight. It's so goopy. After a few days of drying time and a few more coats of clay, I've finally got this plaque to where I want it. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it's actually really cracked. And that will work for what we're doing, you know, it will only add to the age and spooky factor. But that's part of why I put so many coats of clay on, because this air dry clay shrinks as it dries, and since we're using the solid surface plaque that doesn't shrink, that's what makes it crack. The clay has to have some place to go. So if you get really big cracks, then you can just add another layer of clay to kind of fill those in, and that's what got me this finished surface. And then of course, like I said, you know, it's got all these bumps of uneven texture and cracks that will really look great once we get it painted. So the next step is to embellish it. So while my clay there was drying, I also made these little curlicue shapes. They're very delicate, but I just kind of held it up to the plaque. Let's see if I can show you all this without breaking anything. So I kind of just held it up as I was sculpting, if you can even dare call it that. And so this is just like a big snake that I made, like you would make when you were in kindergarten working with clay. I'm sure you've all made these with Play-Doh before. So it's just a snake that I made to the size of this plaque. I made one for the top and one for the bottom to kind of add this little curlicue dimensional thing. But again, this shrinks as it dries. So you don't want to try and do it on the plaque. You want to let it dry separately, and then we'll glue it down so that it won't break. And you can probably see these areas where it did break on me, because this is very fragile stuff we're working with here with all these little curly shapes. And that happened as I was sanding it. This air dry clay you can give a sanding to, and so I went ahead and took advantage of that on these shapes just to kind of smooth in all of my roughness. And so when I broke it, I just glued it back together because I figure, you know, just lean into the messy, right? We want spooky, we want aged, we want broken. So really it was all kind of part of my plan. That's it. Okay, so with those all dry and ready to go, the first thing I'm going to do now is glue. So I've tried a few different glues, and my favorite is this Gorilla Glue. And the way it works best is if you get both sides wet and then glue and let it dry. This is also what I used for repairing my cracks, and it's perfect because the glue expands. So if your edges don't perfectly meet because they've cracked too much, it's okay, the glue will compensate for that. So I glue all that down, and then what I'm gonna do while that's drying is kind of carve into my plaque. I've got all kinds of X-Acto knives and paintbrushes and things in here. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is carve the Edmonds, my last name, Establish, EST, and then the date that we got married. And so it's going to be like one of those old family plaques you would see in the Victorian times, but for us. So I'll carve in the Edmonds, established 1999. And if you are not comfortable just, you know, drawing or like writing right onto your clay, you can use stamps to kind of guide you. You can just stamp with a light colored ink and then carve that, or you can print the words out on your computer and kind of rough it on, like trace it from the paper onto that. I'm just gonna wing it because that's how I roll. But there's all kinds of different ways you can do if you want a little more of a safety net. So I'm gonna glue that on, let it dry, get my carving on, and then we'll be ready to paint. Okay, if it was hard to see before, it's probably really hard to see now that I've painted the whole thing black. But this is going to be our base coat to make it look like stone. So I've got my curlicues glued on super hard, and you might be able to see, again, it's black, maybe not, but the glue actually is visible from under here, and I just kind of went for it because if I want this to look old and like it's been broken and repaired and probably not so well and neglected and not taken care of, right? If I'm going for spooky, then messy works. So I just painted over the top of the glue black like everything else, and it'll just kind of blend in with the stone and just look warped and old and rotten. So we're leaning into the mess. That's the great thing about Halloween stuff, right? Okay, so with it black, now we're going to start sponging on the layers of color to make it look like stone. So, oh, and when you're painting it black, you want to make sure that you get deep into any crevices. So any of your cracks that are left over, the carving that you did underneath the curlicues, you want all of that to be good and dark and thick so that when we layer the stuff on top, it will show through. Okay, so what I've got here is a few different colors of craft paint in 2 different grays and like a khaki. And then in the middle, all that clear stuff, that's called blending gel. That's this stuff here. And that's what's going to make it so that it all works together without just becoming one big soupy browny gray color. So I've got all these different little sponge tips and different sizes and shapes. And I'm just gonna start going to town. I'm gonna get a lot of the blending gel and a little bit of some other colors. And when you're working with like around your carvings, you want to make sure that your pouncer is pretty dry because you don't want it to fill up those cracks. So don't take your time, don't get in a rush, and do layer after layer to give it that mottled effect. So this is going to take me a little while, and I'm going to take my time with it, and then we'll be done, and I'll show you what it looks like when the paint's all dry. This is after a ton, I lost track how many layers of the sponge painting that I did and all the different colors. And then I went back and just kind of cleaned this up. I just kind of added just a little bit more black to make it really legible, and then did a sealer coat because the air dry clay does like to chip and scuff. So I did a sealer coat to kind of keep that all in place. And oh, I have to hang it, so I put a little hanger in the back. And this is a great one that you just kind of push into the wood, so I didn't have to try to hammer any nails and mess up my front. So it's done. I'm really pleased with how it came out. I think it actually does look kind of like stone. And part of that is being patient with the paint and doing multiple layers. And if you see an area that's a little too flat, you can come back in with more black
or a little of the khaki. I think you can really see how that little bit of brown kind of pumped it up a little bit to look more like stone instead of just sponge painted gray. But I mean, it's just a Halloween decoration, so if it's just sponge painted gray, who cares? It's still cute and fun, and you're not trying to fool anybody here. So I'm gonna go hang this up by my front door and see how adorable it looks. Thanks for watching, everybody. I've got lots more great holiday stuff coming up, so be sure and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. And leave me a comment if any questions come up, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.